What's a job that you just associate with a-holes? Head chef. I made it to sous before leaving traditional kitchen work. They're all freaking miserable unless they own the place and are so rich they can just pay someone else to do the work. The executive chef at my last gig, owner, liked to show up to manager meetings in a car that costs around $200,000. I couldn't convince the people in charge of payroll that the reason we couldn't find and retain decent prep cooks was the fact that they paid minimum wage. Also, finance bros, they're all D-bags. Well, I guess if you stay in the kitchen after you turn 35, you just become an a-hole. Story 2. I work in entertainment. Talent agents and managers top the list, and some talents themselves. I worked in the music industry until a little bit before the lockdown, and some of the most baffling behavior I've ever seen comes from talent and managers. I was once running a show where it was more or less a metal music showcase for NAMM years ago. There were some pretty big names on the list like Yngwie Malmsteen and a few other medium names in metal, plus a bunch of smaller bands. Well, it was supposed to be a showcase, 17 bands, 15-minute sets, supposed to be over 10 p.m., started at 5 p.m. No biggie, I've had gigs like this before, but not with all this management there. Because it was a NAMM show, there are a ton of sponsors and other bands, like on different stages as well. Long story short, I got a few managers that try to fight for more time because their bands need it more. My spidey sense is tingling because a couple of the bands don't even talk to me, they just send their manager to check in. Weird. Cut to the first band that plays over the set, just like 10 minutes over, whatever. Well, everyone noticed that and decided nothing mattered. The first few bands went 5 or 10 over, which was manageable but not ideal. As soon as we get to the first big act, they just kept playing. 5, 10, 20 minutes over the set time. I go up to their manager and say, if they don't get off now, I'm turning off the stage and they'll look stupid. No lights, backing tracks, keys, or stage monitors at that point. It's really hard to keep playing. Manager goes up in between songs and comes back to my booth and says, they only have 2 more songs, and shrugs. I called security back to my booth and shut down the stage and let them slowly realize they can't hear themselves and that they're all sliding out of sync. I get ran up on by the band and their manager after the show, telling me how unprofessional I am, and that they play overtime all the time and nobody cares, which is BS. I just pointed at my 17 band list and told them to leave. Nobody else played over their time, and that band got banned from playing NAMM events in the future, so it was really not worth it for them. I have so many more stories, that's just the first that came to my mind. Story 3. This comes from personal experience, restaurant managers. Anyone that has worked in the restaurant industry knows just how much of a schmuck your manager or JERKS can be. I worked in a deli at a grocery store where mommy and daddy's 2 kids worked there. Both of them had a history of substance misuse, but the daughter had a significantly better attitude than the son. He had the audacity to say I should be wearing my paper hat and my tie should be on tighter and shirt tucked in on my break. I looked at him and told him to shove it, and he said, do you even know who I am? I laughed at him and told him if he was intelligent enough to have a say, then they would have given him a supervisor position. He tried to give me a speech on my break, so I definitely told him I was going to be taking a longer break on account of him taking it up with his schmuckery. Don't let those people walk all over you. Mommy and daddy aren't going to keep them in charge if they run off all the employees. Story 4. Influencers. On a trip to Norway, I saw an influencer doing the usual influencer poses, sitting, scenery, back to the camera, large hat, shawls, arms in the air, at a popular location. I didn't think much of it until she started shouting at her assistant doing the photography and holding other props. I don't think she cared about the attention it was attracting at all. She'd do a few poses, go over to the photographer, shout at her, then run over to another spot and do more poses with other props, run back to look at her photos, then shout some more. Her face would switch between scowl for the assistant and smile for the camera near instantaneously. This cycle continued for about 25 minutes. They then left. Story 5. Debt collectors. I've had debt collectors calling my work phone for 6 years now. The last guy who had the phone number, gee, wonder why he changed it. Tried to explain to them a whole bunch of times that Michael's not here, Michael's gone. Don't know Michael. I have no interest in what happens to his credit score, and surprisingly, I have no number I can give them for this Michael I have never met or dealt with in my life. The calls have dwindled to just once every week or so now. One of the regulars is sure I'm Michael, and one of these days she'll catch me out. Likes to say, hi Michael, like someone talking to a friend when I answer. I'm 99% sure that's illegal, right? Story 6. Apartment managers. In June, July, I was notified that my rent was going to go up by about 25%. I was to start paying more for base rent and pet rent after paying one-time pet lease fees and document fees. I had a week to decide whether or not to move out. With the current housing market, I had little choice but to accept and just go through with the lease for another year. In the span of time, my fridge started freezing everything due to an irreversible design flaw. The maintenance man said I needed a new fridge. He called the apartment manager as soon as he diagnosed the problem. While still standing in my kitchen, I was without a functioning fridge for at least 3 weeks. When I went out to sign the lease, I tried to haggle off the BS document fee because I'd been without an appliance that was supposed to be included in my rent. The apartment manager said, and I quote, "That document fee is how people like me make money." So you're telling me that you literally make enough crap so you can take my money and put it directly in your pocket? Go screw yourself. I can't wait to be out of this crap hole next year. Story 7. Recruiters. I actually got yelled at for making a recruiter look bad to her client once. I would have felt badly, except the reason she looked bad was that A, she gave me the wrong company name to research, sort of close name, but it was an entirely different company doing very different things. And B, she gave wildly incorrect directions to get to the interview site, which was in a newly built complex that didn't even appear on any maps yet. I actually left in time to get there 30 minutes early, except the directions were so far off, they took me 2 towns over, and I got there 45 minutes late. As if that wasn't a bad enough way to start off a job interview, the very first question was, "Why do you want to work for us?" To which I thought I gave an excellent response based on many hours of research of a totally unrelated company in a different industry. After some confusing follow-up discussion, it was finally revealed that I wasn't at the place I was told I'd be interviewing at, and everything else went downhill pretty quickly, even though the job itself was in my scope of experience. It was truly embarrassing. The recruiter actually called me about 30 minutes into my drive home, saying the client was very unhappy with the unpreparedness and punctuality of her candidate, and asked me what happened. I told her, politely but in clear detail, and it either didn't click or she didn't want to accept that it was her failure, not mine. She then started lecturing me in a very nasty, condescending voice about how I needed to act like a professional and do my homework beforehand and always allow at least 10 minutes extra time to get to an interview. I again told her how she had told me the wrong company name and website and gave me very wrong directions and reminded her that I had no way to verify either of those as being incorrect beforehand. She said something like, yeah, right, and I said goodbye. Story 8. Speaking from the perspective of being the son of one of these, currently working in a gas station where I interact with these people multiple times a day, and above all else, having been an employee at the Home Depot, construction workers, they are consistently the worst people I meet on a regular basis. Rude, petty, entitled, and worst of all, freaking creepy towards women. Oh, and from what I've seen, alcoholics too, on and off the job site. I had female coworkers at Home Depot who were constantly pestered by many of the construction workers who came in, and we weren't allowed to do anything about it. They said it was company policy, but we all knew it was because these construction companies spend so much money there that we couldn't touch them. Understandably, most of them left. Plus, they're disgusting slobs. Where I work now, we have a roller grill where customers can grab hot dogs and such using tongs. Guess which group of people consistently use their bare hands after they've gone to the bathroom and more than likely didn't wash said hands? Hence why you should never buy gas station hot dogs. And I won't even go into detail about my father, just know he's a narcissistic, cruel piece of crap, and lo and behold, most people I've talked to who had a construction worker parent experienced close to the same home life I did. I know I have a bias, but that bias comes from experience. I'm sure there are good people who work in the field, but I have yet to meet them. Story 9. Restaurant and retail managers, bunch of power-tripping, passive-aggressive bullies in my experience. My sports authority manager when I was a teen, dude was like 6'4" and super built, would purposely walk around with his chest puffed out at 2 times normal walking speed. He would come by my shoe department and be all CEO voice, "Okay, walk with me, talk with me." I had to practically jog to keep up while talking to him about the shoe department. Don't know what he even wanted me to say. I just stocked shoes. I think he just wanted to jog around and power trip. I remember thinking it was just so freaking funny. Like, bro, I'm 17, spiked as hell, and don't know what you want. Ended up getting a fat lawsuit check for them docking overtime hours and some other shady crap, so that was fun. Story 10. Customer service at Walmart, but not because of the employees. It's the customers who are actually usually a-holes, and yes, Walmart specifically. One time I was waiting in the customer service line at Walmart. We were a bit into the aisle, but still plenty of space to go around us. Some random guy comes up and asks if we are in line. I say yes. He proceeds to condescendingly tell us that we are standing in the wrong spot and where we should be standing. I gave my SO an annoyed look and we moved so we didn't have to argue with the dude. Then he walked away. Yeah, he wasn't trying to get in line, just wanted to tell some people that waiting quietly in line was wrong. Never really got why. It's not like the aisle was any less blocked. I hate Walmart. Story 11. TSA agents. I was having a really rough time at LAX one time, just trying to get through baggage and immigration so I could fly home after a month in LA. Every TSA agent was unnecessarily rude, like well beyond authoritative and into "I just like being a schmuck to people" territory. I finally encountered one guy who was nice, said please and thank you, and treated me like a human being with feelings, and I nearly cried. I actually thanked him, told him he'd really improved my night, and I wished his coworkers were more like him. He was touched and wished me a good flight. Story 12. Honestly, a lot of building site jobs. I just remember all the a-hole lads at school who wore their aversion to education and any kind of intellectualism like badges of honor going into the bricklaying and scaffolding apprenticeships before going and working with their dad, uncle, etc. And every interaction I've ever had with most site workers since then hasn't convinced me they aren't exactly the same as they were at 15. Both my sisters have dated multiple scaffolders, renderers, plasterers, etc., and all, bar one, have been real-life caricatures of the a-hole tradesmen, loud, obnoxious, volatile, immature, sexist homophobes who spend most of their wages and evenings on cheap substance and crap larger in the same pub trying to chat up their own mates' girlfriends. Story 13. Mine is pretty surprising. I have some pretty thick skin, and I think working at Plato's Closet for that. It's a consignment store, and I would process people's clothes for purchase in the store. I was screamed at daily. My life was threatened. People even threatened my children's lives that I didn't have. When I told the woman I didn't have children, she told me she would wait until I do and would find me. All that over some clothes that were worn and washed hundreds of times with food stains. People just couldn't believe their trash wasn't worth hundreds of dollars. People suck. Story 14. Top-level management and mid-level management in any capacity. It seems to attract a-holes and psychos, training themselves to view people as numbers and that everything that happens is due to their decisions, not the analysis and recommendations done prior to the decision or the actual work done by the people on the floor. Most of them could be replaced by a monkey, and we would likely be better off for it. Story 15. CEOs, bunch of sociopaths. A company does poorly, and they swap out the CEO with someone whose first course of action is to lay off 25% of the workforce. They bribe politicians to pass legislation that goes against the interests of the general public. They dodge taxes. Their wages are completely out of line with the wages of their workers. Some of them claim to only get $1 a year but get tens of millions of stock, which makes them pillage the company and cook the books to increase the value of the stock so they can dump it. I could go on and on, but you get the picture. Story 16. Hate to admit it, but cops, especially the traffic cops who hide behind a bush or something so they can catch people slipping, they like to say crap like, "We out here writing tickets to keep the road safe," when in reality, if they were plainly visible, every car would slow down as opposed to just the driver being ticketed. It's so obviously a revenue generator, it's absurd. I know the vast majority of police officers are perfectly reasonable, polite, normal people, but my God, do I feel like I've run into all of the crappy ones. Story 17. Arrogant, delusional, exploitive, MLM Huns who chronically badger, cyberstalk, pester, shamelessly lie, psychologically manipulate, and coerce strangers, acquaintances, friends, loved ones into joining the downline of their very illegal pyramid scheme, hardly legal MLM scam. These seem like self-centered and self-serving individuals. I know the MLM cults are not fully to blame alone, even though they attempt to control the minds and relationships of their recruits. These are still grown-up individuals who have enough wisdom, cognition, and maturity to be able to take a step back and reevaluate themselves and seriously question whether these selling/recruitment practices the companies encourage to their main customers, the distributors, fake business owners, to engage in are 1. Dishonest or misleading, 2. Playing on health fears of the woefully ill and disabled, 3. Playing on financial woes of other vulnerable groups, 4. Reliant on demonizing spouses and friends who dislike it, and 5. Excessively stubborn and aggressive with uninterested individuals. I believe these greedy, malignant tools will throw out all their personal ethics just because they have the misplaced hopes of making a semi-decent extra income with their crappy MLM products. They also seem so pathetically desperate for a new community of people in group, a job title that helps them feel like they have the illusion of power and success because they're too underqualified to achieve that feeling from other fields of work. And to top it all off, they don't seem to get sad, publicly or online, when anyone offers any constructive criticism of the MLM they think loves them so much. Instead, they get so haughty, angry, and hostile that they will directly attract the person who gave the critique of the company while ignoring all the good points the person made. Story 18. Sorry to any police officers out there, but the few I have had to deal with, not related to their work, just human to human, have been massive a-holes. When I moved out of my old house, the policeman that bought it came a day early, tried to throw all of our stuff out into the driveway, and ruin my personal items. And then we found out that he ripped out the garden that my mom had tended to for decades just because he could. He was a massive control freak. In our new house, our dogs barked twice at a policeman's aggressive Shar-Pei that was on the lead. Our dogs were contained in our property with the gate closed, and he reported us to the dog warden for having out-of-control dogs, not before filming my mom and pestering her to the point of tears. The ones I have dealt with have been huge control freaks and deeply unpleasant people. Story 19. Professors, the system is so rigged to prefer highly privileged and ruthless individuals that those are the ones you mostly seem to get. In Germany, there's also a mismatch between what professors are usually good at, doing research, overselling their results, and what they end up having to do, teach and nurture students. Add that to systems which, in my experience, often make even serious cruelty nearly impossible to sanction, and boom, fun all around. Story 20. I hate to say this, and I respect them for the importance of their profession, but teachers, they tend to be full of Karens, they tend to talk down to people in the service industries. I've worked at multiple restaurants that have groups of teachers that come in together. They're always rude and disrespectful. There's always a couple of them that will walk out on their tabs. There's always a sensitive entitlement. Hell, my mother was a teacher, and I don't like going out to dinner with her because she's always rude to the staff. Story 21. This is gonna be really unpopular, but nurses. I'm a CNA, and nurses are either the crappiest, most full of themselves people or just decent. If you're in a hospital, you best believe they are doing nothing but complaining about you and every little thing you ask for. They look down on CNAs like we're ants and not worth their time. I've met very few decent nurses, and when I eventually graduate nursing school, I plan to be one of those few. Because half of the nurses out there have never been a CNA and don't know all the work we can actually do for them. Story 22. Left field answer here, but nurse practitioners. I'm a nurse, and almost every NP I've worked with has had a big chip on their shoulder. They're providers, but not doctors, so they think people look down on them or don't respect them because of it. In the ER, they're usually stuck with the easy urgent care patients, so their job kinda sucks. Just a pretty consistently unhappy group of people, and a lot of them take that out on the nurses and patients. Story 23. Military recruiters. Liars. Every one of them. They'll tell a kid the best case scenario without giving full information. Sure, you'll be able to do XYZ, no problem. And it's always complete misinformation, if not absolutely false. Also, stop stalking high school kids. The Marine recruiter at my son's high school not only stalked my kid's social media, but also mine. And this a-hole texted me to make sure my son saw the Snapchat messages he sent. The irony is, my son is actually joining the Navy. Story 24. Therapists. Had a pretty bad experience with 2 of them. I only say therapists because I know people prior to them becoming therapists typically acted high and mighty. It's kind of wild. They've had a bookish answer for everything, always some psych non-answer. They seem to experience a lot through proximity, then they show they never really cared to begin with. It's a very selfish endeavor full of self-interests. I think they get into therapy because they're narcissistic. It's a show for their own experience, to just soak up people's personal information like a sponge. Honestly guessing they develop some type obsession with being a secret keeper, but they get all this trust and then happily remove themselves from your life without batting a lash. It's insane. I can't imagine the solitude they must comfortably live in, since the presence and awareness is a lot where their guidance takes people. And if any of these stories are getting to you so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 25. Police officers. I'm not one of those ACAB people. I just think you have to have a low level of empathy to voluntarily work as an enforcer and someone who takes liberties from people. As a law enforcement official, you're obligated to enforce the laws regardless of how immoral or heavy-handed they are. I wouldn't have the stomach to do it myself. Personal experience tells me most police I've encountered are harsh, aggressive, power-tripping, and intolerant. I can understand why. Their work is dangerous and they deal with the worst of society on a regular basis. So it makes sense they'd end up jaded. I think some level of law enforcement is completely necessary, and I'm grateful that some people are willing to do it. I just also think a lot of that demographic are kind of crappy people. I definitely associate that job with being jerks more than any other. Story 26. ER doctors and rookie cops. I've worked around both many times, and while I understand they are very high-stress jobs, I've encountered more a-holes, prima donna, god-complex behavior from people in those 2 jobs than any other by far. With ER doctors in my local hospital, in many cases, the hospital will treat them like royalty and give them huge bonuses, perks, special treatment, etc. to keep them. I guess it goes to their head, and I've seen many with that "do you know who I am" attitude. To be fair, dealing with certain patients can really put you in a crappy mood pretty fast, but I've seen ER doctors make nurses and staff cry with just the cruelest and unnecessary comments. With some cops, again, it's a high-stress job where you deal with a lot of a-holes, but some are just schmucks for no reason because I guess they have some power for the first time in their life, and they don't know how to use it properly. Many like to flex it for no reason other than they can. But for the good doctors and cops out there, I really do appreciate what you do and literally devoting your lives to helping others in need. Story 27. Well, I'm studying arts and graphic design at university, and all of the art theory teachers and students I've met so far are either pretty chill and interested on what they're doing, with a spark of sharing it and understanding every point of view, or they are freaking a-holes who think every one of your opinions has an invalid point and force politics into everything around them with a vocabulary made to seem superior, and to bore you, all while you're trying not to sleep after the fourth consecutive hour of talk. Screw you, Judy. Oh, and advocates. Story 28. I was a detailer at a small car dealership last year working under the sales manager. This place only had about 50 cars, if that. My job, supposedly, was detailing, but I was constantly driving people around, getting gas, mowing the lawn. You'd think they'd have guys for this. Cleaning and running to various shops. I was pretty annoyed that they complained when I couldn't get a nasty car done in a single day. One day, the sales manager told me to wash pickup beds outside. The service manager, however, completely lost it. He came running up to me, throwing a fit. When I told him what the sales manager had instructed, he yelled, "Screw him, I don't give a crap what he says, you do what I say." I didn't say anything and just did what I needed to do. For the rest of the day, I played on my phone in the back seat of the Ford F-150 I was supposed to be detailing, and then I never came back. I thought about disconnecting the battery and locking the keys in the trunk, but I just left them on the hood instead. They apparently didn't get the hint that I quit, so they sent the police to my house. The officer who came is a good friend of mine, and we just laughed about it. My favorite part of this whole story is that the dealership I work at now actually bought out my old one, and that service manager ended up getting fired for his mouth. Story 29. Tow truck people. I got my car towed in an accident because I forgot the landlord was getting the trees trimmed that morning. I've never had this happen before, so I called ahead to make sure I had everything in place. Asked if they accepted card, was told yes, but upon arrival was told cash only and used their ATM. So there, I already had to pay fees. I was near my bank earlier, so I could avoid this. Also, they charged me an extra $200 for them to use their dollies when I drive a small car. Lastly, I was nothing but polite while communicating. I knew it was my fault, and I understood people working in that field must put up with a lot, but geez, did they have to give me a lot of attitude. Story 30. Human resources. You know they don't do anything, right? They outsource every responsibility and pretend they are in charge of the world. They add zero value to the team. They do not stick up for the employees. They do not stand up to management. They do not know the standards. They do not back up the frontline supervisors. They do not follow safety standards. They have an excuse for every failure. They are in no hurry to solve problems, including and especially if they cause them. They are the most lazy, entitled, unaccountable, hypocritical sycophants who do not do one thing except play popular games all day, every day until they go home early. I pride myself with being an open-minded person who always wants to think the best of others, but I absolutely fail that when it comes to 1. Bureaucrats, 2. Mormons, and 3. Human Remains Department. Story 31. This might sound odd, but as a guy who worked construction for years, I find trash collectors can be real schmucks. They'll drop off a dumpster and then overcharge you if you actually fill it. The guy who collects my trash, I pay him. This is not a municipal trash collector. Won't take anything that isn't in a trash bag inside the can. You can't put out a broken chair or a small bundle of demolition debris like a bunch of 2x4s cut down to 3-foot lengths and tied neatly together. Maybe I expect too much, but it's just trash, and if it's not hazardous and it fits in the truck, why be a schmuck about it? Story 32. Lawyers. No offense to some of my family members who are ones, but I've yet to have a positive experience with a lawyer. Bad ones, yes. Used to run a student news site as an undergrad, got a defamation threat for an article we posted about a nightclub. The lawyer decided to CC the university president just to try to shame me. Absolute needless schmuck move. Worked in actual journalism for a while and many others like that, although the above one stands out because I was way more vulnerable and didn't have an org behind me. Baseless defamation threats made by unscrupulous lawyers are absolutely used in order to try to silence negative coverage. That goes against everything I love about how journalism works. Lawyers representing deadbeat companies, for example Ryanair and or slumlords, and doing anything to prevent their clients from having to pay a cent. My only recent interactions with lawyers have been dealing with people like that. Got screwed over in a business deal for a contract by a guy who was a lawyer. Apparently, I had a habit of it, won the bid, lowballed me, and then ditched me as a subcontractor when I pushed back. Was very careful about what he put in writing and what he didn't. That's kind of how they roll. My overall impression of lawyers is that they're human beings without a conscience who mostly have no idea or care about who they crush so long as they're getting paid. And that a good chunk of them are just lousy people. ETA, graduated law school, never practiced. One of the few people who may actually be proud of that fact. Story 33. Sales managers. As a customer, they can be too pushy. They're too happy and peppy when it comes to making the sale, but as soon as something goes wrong, you can barely get a word from them. To work with them sucks even more. They want to be the yes man regardless of the frickin' rules. They promise things they should not and don't give a crap who that will affect. Story 34. Easy to answer, just too many to whittle down to. Cops, used car dealers, attorneys, politicians, human resources / recruiters. Stockbrokers, corporate shills, hospital and college administrators. Oh, and doctors and surgeons. Obviously, not all of the people holding these jobs are quote unquote bad, but there seems to be a higher propensity for a-holes, d-bags, and those usually demanding we respect my authority, you know who I mean, in these professions. I'd like to think that it has to do with their extensive knowledge about certain subjects, but I've also had so many encounters and heard of so many more with people in these positions that were just so awful and repugnant that it makes you worried for humanity. Most of the time, I just close my mouth and move on to the next person. However, I'm also silently judging you and thinking you suffer from tiny hand syndrome after our interaction. Quote unquote, hands, tiny hands. Story 35. Startup entrepreneurs. I don't know why, but I've had poor experiences working with them. The ones I've known have been arrogant, pay like crap, don't take time to explain what they want or strategize some things properly, but they want miracles to occur the very next day for people to read their minds. They think they're all changing the world and are heroes of some kind, and they're doing something courageous and different when their idea already exists in a million forms and it is already better executed. They worked hard at receiving money from families and friends and connections in unfathomable sums without jobs or having to mortgage anything and are superior to the rest of us working monkeys because we didn't have extra money lying around to start a business. They lie about their success and profits. It doesn't help that there's a whole industry focused on glamorizing entrepreneurship, basically feeding entrepreneurs' ego by telling them how amazing and unique they are. Story 36. Engineers are the most eclectic folk you'll ever meet. Some are wonderful people, but others just can't walk into a room without announcing in one way or another that they are the smartest person there. As an engineering technologist, I've been a minion to a few engineers in my time. They were simultaneously the smartest and dumbest people in the world. They could rattle off every math formula you'd ever need to know, but they often had zero real-world experience. They refused to believe that their mathematically sound plans simply wouldn't work in practice. Engineers also get pinky rings when they graduate university. They love to repeatedly wrap their pinky ring on conference room tables during meetings, just to subtly remind everyone that they're the ones with the pinky ring and the real big brain. The metallic clink of the ring on the table is a very noticeable sound. Luckily for me, I now work adjacent to engineers instead of directly for them. Being able to ignore them when they're being stupid gives me great pleasure. Story 37. Third-party recruiters. In the 25 years of my working life, I don't think I've ever had a good experience with one. I've had them lie to me, lie about me to employers, pressure me into interviews I don't want to go to, modify my CV to make out that I had skills I didn't have, and in general, treat me like I'm a product that they're trying to sell to an employer. I get that the last point is technically true. That being said, they should be a bit more nicer about the process. I understand that it is a high-pressure, high-reward type of business and that it will attract a certain type of person. My issue is, I just don't like dealing with that type of person. Story 38. Zookeeper. Yeah, I know, it's probably an unpopular thing to say, but I think zoos are inherently unethical, no matter how you dress them up, and I've always thought zookeepers are like the ultimate patsy for an industry that directly profits from caging rare and endangered animals. Yeah, they throw some back into circulation, and sure, they'll look after them, but if you've ever walked into a great ape exhibit and watched those poor, wretched souls mill about in a tiny enclave, it's heartbreaking. Story 39. The managers at Subway, the two I dealt with during my short time there, were absolute a-holes. The first one would suck the fun out of the room the moment he walked in. The second one did the same thing, but he was also friends with the owner, and he was only hired to fire all the workers that had been there longer than a year. When he started, he introduced the 3-strike rule. Everyone got 1 strike automatically when he first got hired on. The second strike I got was because I used money out of my own tips to give change to customers since we didn't have any change. The third strike is because I was 1 pan of bread short at the end of my shift because it was so busy and I didn't have time to make an extra pan. I worked a gray shift in a college town and typically the tail end of the shift I worked alone doing everything in the restaurant. Story 40. Estate agent. I've dealt with 100 plus of them over the years and only ever met one that I thought was a nice person, let alone trusted. I don't really think her heart was in the job, which is probably not unrelated. I don't know if the job makes you a schmuck or if only schmucks thrive in the job. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Here in England, buying a house works a bit differently than in the US. For a start, the buyer doesn't use their own realtor. Instead, there's a single estate agent who is hired by the seller and is paid by commission on the sale. As a result, the estate agent's priority is to ensure a sale takes place, period. As far as the buyer is concerned, all the estate agent wants to do is persuade them to make an offer and go through with it. Buyer is getting a duff house, overspending, buying in the wrong area. The agent doesn't care. If they buy the house, the agent gets paid. If they don't, then he doesn't get paid. As far as the seller is concerned, the agent is slightly incentivized to get the best price for them, but not by much. It's Since they're paid a commission in the low single-digit percents, the agent is better off selling more houses quickly for marginally lower commissions on each than spending time fighting for higher prices for his clients and only getting a tiny amount of that back when he could have had a second commission. As a result, estate agents are financially incentivized to lie to both sides in order to make a house purchase happen as quickly as possible, which is outrageous when you consider one side is paying them thousands of pounds to represent them. It's a quote-unquote profession that is very loosely regulated. There's no qualification required to be an estate agent and no license required. There are few similar roles that you can walk into with no qualifications other than a smart suit, then represent members of the public in one of the biggest decisions they'll ever make in their lives. Of all the jobs in the UK, estate agents are perhaps the most hated. Story 41. Firemen. I work in an admin position for an emergency services department, and I can say that contrary to the usual public image, most firemen tend to be massive schmucks. Usually, it's a combination of the alpha male/jock mentality, along with some hardcore misogyny and alt-right conservative beliefs and stereotypes. A young gal I used to work with took a higher paid admin position specifically within the fire department. She ended up leaving within 6 months due to how poorly she was treated over there. Apparently, she would get hit on pretty much daily by the captain and the other higher-ups despite being married, in addition to them making constant inappropriate comments towards her. There was also an incident a few years back where a previous fire captain tried to start a fight with a deputy on scene at a medical call. For clarification, our fire, police, and EMS all roll together for fire and medical calls. Story 42. Teachers, especially high school ones. Having been a trainee in that field for 4 years, never have I seen such a level of arrogance and entitlement in any other field. A lot of them think they are super nannies or professional psychopedagogists, spending hours telling you how to manage a classroom and pointing out every little faulty detail in your lessons, when they can't manage a classroom with more than 5 students without having a riot within 15 minutes. Also, the hypocrisy between colleagues is absolutely nauseating. Everyone talks behind everyone's back and criticizes everybody in every single school I have been to. No wonder here in Belgium, fewer and fewer people want to work in that field or get disgusted very quickly. Story 43. Professional landlords. Not the single parent renting a room to make ends meet in a house they're still living in, or the situational landlord who has had to go abroad for work for 12 months and wants to keep their flat ticking over whilst they are away. No, the career landlords whose sole purpose is to suck the housing market dry and profiteer off the backs of others' needs for a roof over their head. These types are every bit as bad as the multi-billionaires of the world, and the business model is exactly the same. They're just on the other side of the paycheck. Let other people work hard and run off with the profits or remaining profits of that work whilst leaving the workers in a situation where they can just about get by. Story 44. Most upper management in a corporation, there are 2 ways to get promoted and be what a company considers a good manager. The first and rarest is to be an understanding but firm manager that understands that every person below them has their own life and goals. You treat these people with respect and are honest with them about what you and the company need from them as a worker, and you do your best to make sure they have all the tools necessary to succeed in their job. The second and most common is your typical narcissistic a-hole manager who treats anyone below them as a tool that they aren't getting 100% from because they have other things that are taking away from what they could be doing at work, like their personal lives or goals. These people push you to the absolute limit and demand absolute 130% efficiency out of anyone they can bully into working harder. They yell at anyone even slightly lower on the totem pole than them and are needlessly aggressive and talk over anyone who argues against their point. And for that reason, they are seen as quote-unquote strong leaders. Story 45. Personal trainers. Mate, you wanted to be in the gym all day in comfy clothing and have a good body. You know what I want? To be able to use social media to catch up with friends, not be bombarded daily with 30 motivational essays on how you can improve my life. Also, stop acting like life is so freaking golden for you. Ooh, here's me looking jacked to the right of camera on a sunny day with 11 updates on the salad I ate today while showing you my 3 clients I starved for 4 days before this photo so they get their lovely after picture. Just screw off. If you were doing as well as you claim, you wouldn't need to be hammering my feed 9 times a day asking for new clients. Yeesh. Story 46. Meter maids. I once saw one approaching as I was paying for my dashboard slip at the machine. I ran over and let the guy know that I was in the process of paying and detailed my car as the last one on the right in a 12-car mini lot. So I pay for my slip, and when I return to my car, there's a parking ticket. I see the guy in the distance. I ran over to him with the ticket and reminded him about our prior conversation, how I had been in the process of paying, etc. He says no problem multiple times, takes the ticket, and walks away. When I return to my car within the allocated time, I see another ticket. It's the original one he gave me. Like, dude, just walked over and put it back in my car. I wandered the general vicinity looking for my meter-maid nemesis, and lucky for us both, I never found him. His features are ingrained in my mind, though. You better hope we're not in the same nursing home or something. Revenge will be out of a frickin' Saw movie. Story 47. Dating gurus. Most of them are either completely out of touch with their target audience, awkward or socially anxious people that can't get dates and preach, just be yourself, everyone will love it, because they naturally have a lot of charisma and confidence and don't realize that's just not true for everyone. Or they're a raging former incel that, even after fooling around with women, keep the mentality that women are horrible, shallow creatures that are only useful to them if they can be a conquest. Story 48. I work in banking and can confirm that anyone above a teller level is 90% likely to be a schmuck. Your personal lender friend, he is not your friend. You are nothing more than an oil spot to drill. That special rate you got him is convincing the bank to give you money because you will either give it back with interest or giving the collateral back, which they can sell back for more. I get that credit and loans are unfortunately a necessary evil to most in the current society we have built, but all lenders have no other sense than dollar signs when they look at you. Story 49. For me, more often than not, is tattoo shops. I know everyone will probably think I'm crazy for that, but somehow, some way, almost every tat shop I've been to, the guys are always miserable, annoyed, and have a major attitude for any small question I have. Sometimes they even make me feel dumb, and I know I'm not the problem because A, I consolidate my questions and keep them to a minimum, because I know people in customer service hate customers who want their bum wiped for them, lol. B, I would notice that all the other customers in the shop get the same treatment, so it wasn't only directed at me. It's weird, and whenever I've mentioned this to other people, they automatically think I'm crazy or I'm the problem because it seems like all the tat shops everyone goes to give great customer service and all positive vibes. I'm still looking for those shops to this day, lol. And if any of these stories got to you and you're nodding in your head in agreement like, heck yeah, well, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. I'll catch you in that video.